Hi, I'm Libby Messiah. I'm a licensed real estate agent in Georgia and Alabama. I serve the Columbus, Georgia, Phoenix City area, and I'm brokered by Norman Real Estate. You won't find me doing lip sync on TikTok, and I think it's great that there are agents out there that can do that. It's just not me. But what I can do is to help provide education on different subjects and hope to do that over the course of the next few weeks. Depending on what subject just kind of floats up and floats out to me. So lately, a lot of people have asked me about rent to own as a path to home ownership. And usually my response is a very knee jerk, no, don't do that, which isn't fair. It means that I'm not providing them information, I'm providing them an opinion, and I need to be providing information. And it might be a potential path for some. I've purchased my first home 38 years ago. I've owned 7 primary homes and a number of rentals and renovation project homes. I don't always purchase my homes using traditional mortgage, but I have never used the rent to own. I've known a few people who have tried rent to own, and for some reason, the majority of them failed. I do know one gentleman who currently owns his home free and clear, and he purchased it in a rent to own path, and it worked. So we're going to talk about as quickly as possible what is rent to own, why somebody might seek this option, the pros for the renter and the landlord, the risk or the cons, and some final tips and takeaways. So, what is rent to own? Be careful who you ask. So, I wanted to get some definitions. I went out to Google University, and there's a lot of definitions of what rent to own is. Some of those definitions lump real estate in with other things like cars and jewelry, and some get it all confused with the lease purchase process that is different. Um, and really, depending on what state you're sitting in, they may offer a different legal definition, but here's the Libbyism for it. Rent to own for the purpose, strictly the purpose of purchasing property, is a legal transaction where the property is rented with the understanding that the property will become the renter's by a specific time, after a specific number of payments, and or after a total amount has been paid. That's just kind of a brief, that you enter into an agreement, you rent the property, and when you either meet the long-term commitment, the total commitment, that property is deeded over to the buyer or the renter. Why would people consider rent to own? Well, those who ask about it, first of all, they want to own their own home. It's the American dream, they say, and that's what individuals want. They want to own their own home. They think, or they absolutely know, that they don't have a credit score that will allow them to purchase a home immediately. And they're looking to own that home immediately, and not go through the process of repairing their credit in a longer term. Sometimes the individuals are self-employed, or they feel like they don't have that provable income and aren't going to be able to purchase through more traditional methods. Or, and I've met one gentleman, this absolutely was him. He qualified to buy a home. He could purchase anything he really wanted. And he'd want the option to purchase the home, but because of some circumstances going on, he wasn't sure that he was yet ready for the permanence of a mortgage, or that he would have to sell the house if his circumstances changed, and he was looking at potential circumstance change in the immediate future. And then some folks just think that they can't get a mortgage for some other reason. So, what's the pros for renters and owners? Renters, you can move in now and finish that payment process over the long term. If those life circumstances change immediately, you don't have to sell it. You are still just a renter. It's still just a rental agreement, and you can meet those minimums of that agreement. In the long term, maybe someone thinks that they will or could save interest. Being in a rent-to-own agreement, those payments would be fixed probably for a long term and would avoid the risk of market-related increases in rent. You may be able to make changes to the property, improvements to the property depending on the contract, and you may be able to get that house that you are just in love with. For owners, there's some positives for them too. One, they have a better prospect for long-term renters. Someone's going to live there long enough to purchase the home. It is a long-term situation. Those renters are going to be more motivated to maintain the property. It's going to be theirs. It's not yet, but they're going to keep it like it is. Depending on the contract, the owner may have no responsibility for repairs. And if the contract fails, the owner still has a house. They can evict, they can rent it again, or they can sell it. What are the cons? This is a very busy screen because there are a lot of cons for renters, and most of them, or a lot of them, are just about around one thing. It's really just rent. There's no protections or assistance if life events make payments difficult. You can still be evicted. There are no tax credits. You don't develop equity until you make that final payment. Your name's not on the deed. You have zero interest. If something happens and you have to move, you don't get any of the interest that you've spent in the home. You can't insure the property as an owner. The owner would have to carry that insurance in case of serious disaster like fire and flood that renter's insurance doesn't cover. If the renter in the agreement dies or leaves, others in the home, like their spouse or children, may not have the opportunity to continue that agreement and would lose everything invested. If the owner dies, their estate can call the note due immediately. And I have seen that happen where someone was in a rent-to-own agreement, the owner died, and his estate, administrator of his estate, sent an eviction notice and said, pay it all now or get out. And that is what happened. If the owner has a mortgage on the home and they don't pay it, the foreclosure company really doesn't recognize any investment that the renter has had, and they can evict. And if the owner decides to sell the property, the new owners may not recognize the agreement and they could evict, and the renter would lose anything invested. Payments and purchase may not show up on credit, and so that credit opportunity is lost. Another thing is one that kind of to me is a big one also, is that someone may settle for a home that they don't want just because there is a rent-to-own opportunity. But in the end, it wasn't a good fit anyway. They didn't get the house they loved. There's some negatives to the owner. Depending on the contract, they can't increase the rent. Depending on the contract, selling the home would be very difficult due to the long-term nature of the agreement. And they'd have to maintain property insurance. So some final tips and takeaway. Rent-to-own is one of the riskiest forms of home purchase. Many times it's a long-term solution to a short-term problem, which to me just doesn't make sense. Consider other options. Work on your credit or income issues. Be patient. Be persistent. Talk to a mortgage lender now and learn more. There are lenders who work with self-employed or alternative documentation loans. Owner financing may be an option, and it is not the same as rent-to-own. Lease purchase, if your credit's almost there, might be an option. Rent-to-own might be a good option if you found the house. It's the one. You love that house. You've seen it forever. You want it, and it checks every box, and you can afford it, and you love it, and your credit isn't quite there yet. Of course, if it's that great of a house, the owners may not consider rent-to-own. but if they do, that might be a great time to consider rent to own and to fix your credit and go through the traditional purchase process as quickly as possible. Or you want the option to purchase a home, but you feel that life circumstances in the immediate future may twirl in a different direction and you don't want to be encumbered with selling it. I'm sure there are a lot of other tips, a lot of other takeaways, a lot of other pros and cons that I didn't think about, but these are some of the ones that I did. Thank you for taking a few minutes to learn with me. Your dream is my goal. Stay tuned for more in the future, and let me know if there's something specific you'd like to hear a quick topic shared on.